This is the Banner Finance how-to video on entering journal vouchers. There are several journal voucher screens that you can use. FGA JVCM is the mass entry form, and it's probably the form you're going to use the most often. FGA JVCD, the detailed journal voucher form, is necessary when you're doing certain things like closing encumbrances. That's because there are fields on FGA JVCD that are not on FGA JVCM that are required to close encumbrances. In that video, we will take a look at that form and show you the appropriate fields. FGA JVCM, the mass entry form, allows you to see the most information at one time. It also provides you some shortcuts that can be helpful when you're creating a journal entry. Let's talk about the parts of the form. The first block is the document number, and you'll see at the informational line on the bottom of the form, enter the word next, or you can leave it blank and the system will automatically assign the document number. Or you can enter a specific document number. If you're going in to look for a specific journal entry number, you enter that document number and it will call up the data. In this situation, we're just going to do a sample journal entry and show you some of the results. So we're going to go to the next block. The system puts in the date and an NSF checking box is checked. That means the system has NSF checking on by default, and unless you uncheck it, budget will be considered. The document total is a hash total of your entries. It doesn't matter what rule code you use, doesn't matter what sign you use, debit or credit, plus or minus. The total of all entries in the absolute amount is what the document total is. So if you put in a debit for $10 and a credit for $10, the document total will be $20. If you don't know what it is, put in an amount and the system will help you balance it at the end. But you should be aware of what you're trying to enter. In the default value section of the form, you can enter the type, which is the rule code. You can enter a bank code if it's required on that rule type. You can enter a description. If you're doing deposits and you want to enter a deposit document number, you can do that. If you're doing budget entries, you can enter the budget period. And when you go to the journal voucher detail section of the form, these values will automatically default on each row to save you some typing. In this case, because we're going to do several different things on one journal entry, I'm not going to use defaults. You do a next block to go down to the journal voucher details section, and here's where you can enter entries, delete entries, or modify existing entries on a journal entry that's already there. The sequence number is assigned automatically by the system. You tab through, and in this example we're going to use three main types of journal entries. The first one is a JE15. A JE15 allows you to transfer money within the same fund code, just to different accounts. The situation we're in at the LCTCS, where we use campus codes on all of our accounts, a JE15 only allows you to transfer in a fund within the same campus code. If you need to go between campus codes, you need to make entries using a JE16 or a CD3. A JE15 is what we call an intra-fund, within a fund type of a journal entry. If you've posted to a wrong account and you need to reclassify it, you just come in here and make the entry, and as long as it balances, Banner will be happy. The debit credit indicator is controlled by the rule code, and for a JE15, a JE16, or a CD3, we will use debits and credits as traditional. Pluses and minuses are used for budget entries such as a BD01 or a BD02. Cash receipt entries, CR05s, can be done on this form as well, and they use a plus or a minus. A plus when you're increasing your cash, a minus when you're decreasing your cash. But in this case, we're going to credit an expense account, and our description is going to be reclass expense. We do not need a bank code in this situation because a JE15 is within the same fund and campus. So there is no cash impact of this particular journal entry. If we tab through the rest of the fields, you'll see that there are a couple of other fields, but they're not used or not necessary for this entry and are not used on a regular basis. When we're done with this row, we do a next record or a down arrow to create the next record, and we tab through. We do a JE15 again. In this case, we're going to debit the entry to offset it. So this is a pair of perfectly acceptable entries, and when we do the next record, the system checks to see if it's postable or if there's an error. And when we do the next record, the system will check to see if there's a problem with this entry. In this situation, there's insufficient budget because we didn't put any budget in for this particular pool, so we can override the budget. Normally you want to get budget monies transferred, but in this case I'm just going to override the budget. You must be authorized to override an NSF condition. Now you see the entry is postable. The next rule code that we were talking about is a JE16. A JE16 is used when you post in between campuses or in between funds. In this case, we're going to transfer some money to a different fund, and we need an offsetting entry there because we said they must balance. And notice I did not enter a bank code, and it says that the bank code must be input or defaulted from the fund. Since we don't have those established, we put in our bank code so the system knows which cash account to impact. And you'll see that this entry is now postable as well. Now a CD3 can transfer money between funds, or it can be used to record expenses that are charged automatically to your bank, for example, a bank fee. You don't write a check to the bank has already taken that money, so you want to record the expense. The CD3 is a self-balancing one-sided entry that can be used. So we'll enter a CD3 just as an example here, and we debit it because it's an expense, and the CD3 requires a bank code as well. So if you're done entering your entries and you want to see if the last one is postable, you can do a save. When you're ready to complete the entry, click next block and go to the complete icon and attempt to complete your document. However, we see that our total of our transactions is different than the document total. It's only $75.50 instead of the $125.50 that was entered. So we can close the message, do a previous block and a previous block a second time to correct the document total. In which case you then do a next block and a next block to complete the document. And we see that the journal entry here at the bottom, J4551, is completed and forwarded to the posting process. Now, how do we see what this journal entry has impacted? Let's first take a look at our expense account. FGI BDST is a good one to look for the budget status of your operating ledger. So if you type in the org, the fund, and the program and do the next block, it will bring up the account or accounts that are active out there. If you use an account up here in the header, that's just the starting point of accounts that are out there. So we see that our year-to-date activity is $22.75. We will return here momentarily once posting has taken place. Now that posting is done, let's take a look at what has happened to this account. We'll see that we have a new category, the third-party processing fees. There's our $50 bank fee. We moved $10 from the educational supplies to household supplies, so this was $22.75. But we also transferred $2.75 out to a different fund. Now, how would we know that? Well, there's a couple of ways we can check. 7241 was our original account. If we highlight that account and go to options, we can go to the Transaction Detail Information Form, FGI-TRND. This will show us the operating ledger or the revenue expense activity for this particular fund, org, and account combination. You'll see here that there was an invoice posted at one point for the $22.75 that was there initially, and it was all expended against that one account. But we wanted to reclassify some of it. We reclassified $10 and we moved $2.75 to a new fund with our journal entry 4551, just to help you see what these transactions mean. Noticing that there's a scroll bar, if we move this section over, we can see that the fund that was used is the same fund that was on our query to begin with. But let's say we wanted to find what fund this money was moved to. We can do a query on the document, on the journal entry. So we go ahead, highlight it, and do the query by document. And if it's an invoice, it takes us to the invoice query. If it was a journal entry like this, it takes us to the journal entry form, FIGI-DOCR, tab, and we see that it's a journal entry. If you type a document number in here and the document type does not appear, or it tells you at the bottom of the form that document doesn't exist, then it hasn't posted yet. In this case it has. So we'll do a next block. We'll see that our journal entry had 5 records. Here's our credit and our debit for the $10 that we reclassed the expense. If we scroll down, we see we have our 2 entries where the money's been moved to a new fund, and we see the original fund 110001 and the fund that we're debiting 131,022. Now, if you want to see the actual postings throughout the ledger, this is just the transaction on the document that we entered. If you want to see all the detailed postings, you come to Options again and Access Document Postings. And this form is very helpful because a single line entry on a document can potentially generate many, many lines of postings in our ledger, or ledgers I should say, because there are several different ledgers that this impacted. Our initial account that we used, 7241, is in the operating ledger, but there's a general ledger impact. It affected the claim on cash, 1099, and it also has a summary account for expenses in the general ledger, so that the general ledger is debited and credited an equal amount for the offset. Alright? That's this particular transaction. Let's go down to our bank fee expense and just take a look at the postings here. Because this was an actual disbursement of funds from our bank, not only did we see the impact against the 11001 fund, but we also see it against the B0001 fund, the bank fund. So we have credited cash and debited our claim on cash, and the offset to claim on cash was a credit in fund 110001, which also has our expense summary and the actual expense account itself. And this was shown as a plus or an increase to the expense. So it's always a good idea, if you're not certain of all the impact, to come in to a form like this and check the options to see what other drill downs you can perform to view the results of your journal entry. Notice at the top of the form there's a trail of what forms you've drilled down into. So as you exit back out, you'll see that we'll get back to our budget query form. I hope this has been helpful. Thank you for watching.